At the grocery store, the cashier scanned my items and said, "This is your last meal. I'm so sorry." The words hit me while she was running a box of pasta across the scanner, her hands moving mechanically, but her eyes locked on mine with this intensity that made my skin crawl. I was standing in the checkout lane at Save Mart on a Thursday evening, buying groceries for the week like I'd done 100 times before. Chicken breast, broccoli, pasta, marinara sauce, a six-pack of beer, some bananas going brown at the edges because they were discounted. Normal stuff. The kind of shopping cart that screams, single guy in his 30s who can't be bothered to cook anything complicated. The cashier was maybe 50, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun and a name tag that read, Rosa. I'd never seen her before, which wasn't surprising since I'd only lived in Millbrook for 3 months and barely paid attention to the rotating staff at the grocery store. "Excuse me?" I said, because surely I'd misheard. Maybe she'd said something about a meal deal, or asked if this was my last item. But Rosa's expression didn't change. Her face had gone pale, her lips pressed together like she was fighting not to say more. She scanned the chicken and the broccoli, her movements getting faster, more urgent. Then she leaned across the conveyor belt, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt louder than a shout. "They know you're here. They've known for 2 weeks. You need to leave town tonight. Don't go home. Don't pack. Just get in your car and drive as far as you can." My brain completely short-circuited. I stood there with my wallet halfway out of my pocket, staring at this woman who'd just told me to abandon my life based on absolutely nothing I could understand. "What are you talking about? Who knows I'm here?" Rosa's eyes darted toward the front of the store, then back to me. She scanned the marinara sauce and the beer with shaking hands. "I can't explain here. Too many cameras. Too many ears. But I recognized you from the list. Your photo, your name, your address. They're coming for you tonight, probably at your apartment around 10 p.m., when they know you'll be home and settled in for the evening." She finished scanning, and the total flashed on the screen. 43 67s. She looked at the number and then at me, with this expression of absolute devastation, like she was watching someone at their own funeral. "Please, I know you don't know me. I know this sounds insane, but I worked for them for 6 years before I got out. I know how they operate. They're efficient, they're brutal, and they never fail." I paid with my debit card because my brain couldn't process an appropriate response, and Rosa handed me the receipt with her phone number written on the back in small, careful numbers. "Call me when you're safe, or don't call me at all. Just please don't go home tonight." I walked out of Save Mart with my groceries and a feeling of complete unreality, like I'd accidentally stepped into someone else's nightmare. My car was parked in the third row of the lot, a beat-up Nissan Sentra I'd bought used when I'd moved to Millbrook for my new job as a software developer at a tech startup called Next Gen Solutions. I'd been living in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of town, a quiet building with mostly retirees and young couples. Nothing about my life was interesting enough to warrant a cryptic warning from a grocery store cashier. I loaded the bags into my trunk and sat in the driver's seat, staring at the receipt with Rosa's phone number. My hands were shaking. I told myself this was ridiculous, that Rosa was probably mentally ill or had mistaken me for someone else. But her fear had been real. The specific details, 10 p.m., my apartment, the list with my photo, felt too precise to be delusion. I'd moved to Millbrook 3 months ago, specifically because it was boring and anonymous. I'd grown up in Chicago, worked in tech there for 8 years, and then had a brutal breakup with my ex-fiancée that made me want to start over somewhere completely different. Millbrook was a mid-sized town in Vermont, population 30,000, known primarily for its maple syrup production and having one of those quaint downtown areas tourists love to photograph. I'd applied for the next-gen job on a whim, interviewed over video call, and accepted their offer because it paid decently and came with relocation assistance. The company developed security software for small businesses, nothing cutting-edge or controversial. My co-workers were pleasant but forgettable. My apartment was clean and quiet. My life was aggressively normal. So why would someone be coming to kill me at 10 p.m. tonight? Because that's what Rosa had meant. The phrasing about my last meal, the urgency, the instruction not to go home. She was warning me about an assassination. The word felt melodramatic even in my own head, but I couldn't think of a better term. I drove to a coffee shop called Groundwork and sat in my car in the parking lot, debating what to do. It was 6:15 p.m. If Rosa was right, I had less than 4 hours before someone showed up at my apartment planning to kill me. If she was wrong, I was panicking over nothing and would feel like an idiot. I pulled out my phone and stared at her number. What would I even say if I called? "Hi, I'm the guy you checked out at Save Mart. Can you elaborate on who's trying to kill me and why?" It sounded absurd, but her eyes had been so terrified, so certain, I compromised by calling my friend David, one of my former co-workers from Chicago who'd helped me move to Vermont. He answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hey man, what's up?" I explained about Rosa and the warning, trying to make it sound less insane than it felt. David listened without interrupting, which was one of his better qualities. When I finished, there was a long pause before he spoke. "Okay, this is going to sound paranoid, but do you remember that thing with synthcore?" Synthcore. The name hit me like cold water. I hadn't thought about Synthcore Industries in over a year, had actively tried to forget about the whole situation. When I'd worked at my previous company in Chicago, I'd discovered that one of our clients, Synthcore Industries, was using our security software to cover up some seriously illegal activity. I'd found evidence in their system logs that they were routing funds through shell companies, possibly involved in money laundering or fraud on a massive scale. I'd reported it to my boss, who dismissed my concerns. I'd reported it to the compliance department, who told me to mind my own business. Finally, I'd contacted a federal whistleblower hotline and spoken with an investigator named Special Agent Veronica Huang from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. She'd taken my evidence seriously, opened an investigation, and told me to keep my head down while they built their case. 6 months later, Synthcore's executives had been arrested. The story made national news for about a week. Massive financial fraud, connections to organized crime, executives facing decades in prison. And then I'd moved to Vermont and assumed it was all behind me. "You think Synthcore is connected to this?" I asked David, my stomach churning. I testified at a deposition, but that was sealed. Nobody outside the investigation should know I was involved. David's voice got quieter, more serious. "When did you testify?" "About 4 months ago, right before I moved. And you moved 3 months ago, which means you've been in Millbrook for 3 months. Long enough for someone to track you down if they were motivated. Long enough to plan something. Look, I'm not saying the cashier is definitely right, but you blew the whistle on people connected to organized crime. That's not the kind of thing they forgive." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Special Agent Huang had assured me. The investigation would protect my identity, that whistleblowers had legal safeguards. But safeguards only worked if the system wasn't compromised. If someone had leaked my name, my location, my testimony, then I wasn't protected at all. I called Rosa's number. She answered immediately, her voice tense. "You're still in town." "I'm at a coffee shop. I need you to explain what's happening." "What list? Who are you?" She took a shaky breath. "I worked for a contracting company called Sentinel Group for 6 years. We did specialized work for clients who needed problems solved discreetly. That's the sanitized version. The real version is that we were hired killers, corporate assassins, whatever you want to call it. I did surveillance and logistics. Not the actual hits, but I was part of the operation. I got out 2 years ago, faked my death, moved here, started over. I thought I was safe. Then last week, one of my former colleagues contacted me. He'd gotten sloppy with security and his encrypted files had been seized by federal investigators. The files contained information on upcoming contracts, including targets and timelines. Your name was on the list. Your address, your workplace, your daily routine. The hit is scheduled for tonight because you'll be home alone. Predictable, easy." My entire body went cold. "Why are you warning me? If you're really from this organization, won't they come after you for interfering?" Rosa's laugh was bitter. "They're already coming for me. My colleague who got caught? He's cooperating with the FBI to reduce his sentence. He gave them names, locations, everything. I'm on that list too, just with a different timeline. I figured if I'm already dead, I might as well try to save someone else." I tried to process this. A professional killer was warning me that other professional killers were coming to murder me in less than 4 hours, and the only reason she was helping was because she was going to be killed too. "I need to call the FBI. I need to contact the agent who handled my case." Rosa's voice sharpened. "Do you trust her completely? Because whoever leaked your information had access to federal investigation files. That means someone inside the system is compromised. If you call the wrong person, you'll just accelerate the timeline." She was right. I couldn't trust anyone in the official channels until I knew who'd leaked my information. I asked Rosa what I should do, and she told me to drive to the police station and ask for Lieutenant David Crane, a detective she'd worked with years ago when she'd been a confidential informant on an unrelated case. He's one of the few honest cops I've met. He won't ask questions until you're somewhere safe. Tell him Rosa Delgado sent you, and he'll understand this is serious. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my car watching the sky darken through the windshield. The groceries in my trunk felt like a cruel joke. I'd bought food for a week I wasn't going to live to eat. I started the car and drove to the Millbrook Police Department, a small brick building on the north edge of downtown. It was 6:45 p.m. I walked through the front doors and approached the officer at the desk, a young guy in his 20s who looked bored until I said I needed to speak with Lieutenant David Crane immediately about a credible threat to my life. Lieutenant Crane came out to meet me 10 minutes later. He was in his early 50s, black, with gray at his temples and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen everything twice. He escorted me to an interview room and listened while I explained about the grocery store, Rosa's warning, the Synthcore case, the hit scheduled for 10 p.m. He didn't interrupt, didn't look skeptical, just took notes in a small notebook. When I finished, he asked to see the receipt with Rosa's number. I handed it over, and he photographed it with his phone before giving it back. "Rosa Delgado contacted me 3 days ago," he said. "She told me she had information about a contract killing but wouldn't give me details over the phone. She said she'd reach out again when the situation became active. I've been waiting for her call. The fact that she sent you to me means she trusts you're telling the truth, and this is happening tonight. Lieutenant Crane made a phone call, speaking in low tones to someone about safe houses and protective custody. Then he turned back to me. I'm calling in a favor with a federal contact who owes me. They'll put you in a secure location tonight while we verify Rosa's information, but I need you to understand something. If there's a leak in the federal investigation, we can't use standard channels. We're going to have to move carefully. He made another call, this time to someone he addressed as Agent Wyatt. I listened as he explained the situation using careful language about a potential compromise in a witness protection case and the need for immediate secure housing. Agent Wyatt must have agreed, because Lieutenant Crane nodded and hung up. Agent Wyatt works in counterintelligence. She's outside the normal chain of command for financial crimes, which means if there's a leak in Special Agent Huang's division, Wyatt won't be connected to it. She's sending someone to pick you up in 20 minutes. You'll be taken to a federal safe house outside of town. In the meantime, we need to contact Rosa and get her somewhere safe too. Lieutenant Crane called Rosa, and I watched his expression change as he listened to her response. When he hung up, he looked grim. She's not coming in. She says the moment she walks into a police station, she's making herself a visible target. She'd rather take her chances on her own. I felt a surge of guilt. Rosa had warned me, had risked her life to save mine, and now she was out there alone while I was getting federal protection. Can't you send officers to her house? Force her to accept protection? Lieutenant Crane shook his head. Rosa, Delgado is a ghost. The name she's using here is an alias. I don't know where she actually lives, and she's not going to tell me. She's been in hiding for 2 years, and she knows how to stay invisible. The best thing we can do for her is take you seriously and catch the people who are trying to kill you both. A federal agent arrived at 7:30 p.m. to transport me to the safe house. She introduced herself as Agent Monica Wyatt, a woman in her 40s with short blonde hair and an FBI badge clipped to her belt. She drove an unmarked sedan and kept checking her mirrors the entire drive, making sure we weren't being followed. The safe house was a cabin about 30 miles outside Millbrook, hidden at the end of a dirt road surrounded by dense forest. Inside, it was basic but functional. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room with heavy curtains over every window. Agent Wyatt handed me a burner phone with her number programmed in. You don't leave this house until we clear the threat. You don't call anyone on your personal phone. You don't access social media or email. If you need something, you call me. Understood? I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation finally sinking in. I was in a safe house because professional killers were planning to murder me in 2 hours. Agent Wyatt left one of her colleagues, a younger agent named Derek Cole, to stay with me at the cabin. Derek was in his late 20s, armed with a handgun holstered at his hip, and seemed more nervous than reassuring. We sat in the living room in uncomfortable silence while he scrolled through something on his phone, and I tried not to think about what was happening at my apartment. At 9:45 p.m., Derek's phone buzzed with a call. He answered, listened, then looked at me with wide eyes. They're at your building. Millbrook PD set up surveillance based on Rosa's intel. 2 men entered through the parking garage 15 minutes ago. They bypassed the security door using a code cloner and took the stairs to your floor. They're outside your apartment right now. My heart slammed against my ribs. This was real. Rosa had been right. If I'd gone home tonight, if I'd ignored her warning, I'd be dead. Are the police arresting them? Derek shook his head. They're waiting to see what happens. If the suspects break in and find you're not there, they might lead us to whoever hired them. We waited in tense silence. At 10:03 p.m., Derek's phone rang again. He answered, listened for a long moment, then swore under his breath. They broke into your apartment using lockpicks. They searched for 8 minutes, realized you weren't there, and left the building. Officers attempted to pursue, but the suspects had a motorcycle waiting in the parking garage. They evaded pursuit. I felt a strange mixture of relief that I wasn't there and frustration that the killers had escaped. Derek made another call, speaking to someone about lockdown protocols and escalation procedures. When he hung up, he looked at me seriously. This changes things. Now they know you're not at your apartment, which means they know you were warned. They'll be looking for you actively instead of waiting at your home. We need to keep you here until we can figure out who's orchestrated this and shut them down. I spent the night in the safe house barely sleeping, listening to every sound outside and wondering if someone had followed us. In the morning, Agent Wyatt returned with Lieutenant Crane and another person I didn't recognize, a man in his 60s wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Agent Wyatt introduced him as Gordon Phillips, an attorney from the Department of Justice who specialized in witness protection cases. Gordon sat across from me at the cabin's small kitchen table and asked me to walk through my entire involvement with the Synthcore case from beginning to end. I told him about discovering the suspicious financial activity, reporting it through official channels, being dismissed by my company, and finally contacting the FBI whistleblower hotline. I told him about Special Agent Huang, about the deposition, about the sealed testimony that was supposed to protect my identity. Gordon took notes and asked clarifying questions about who knew I'd been the whistleblower and who had access to the investigation files. When I finished, Gordon leaned back and folded his hands. The Synthcore investigation was supposed to be airtight. Your identity as the whistleblower was known only to a small circle: Special Agent Huang, 2 other FBI agents, the prosecuting attorney, and a handful of DOJ officials. The fact that your name, location, and daily routine were leaked to a contract-killing organization suggests someone in that circle is compromised. The implications of that statement felt overwhelming. Someone in the federal government, someone trusted with protecting witnesses, had sold me out to criminals. How do we find out who leaked my information? Gordon's expression was grim. We investigate everyone with access, but that takes time, and right now, time is the one thing we don't have. The people trying to kill you know you've gone to ground. They'll be escalating their efforts to find you, which puts pressure on us to move quickly. Lieutenant Crane spoke up. What about Rosa Delgado? She gave us solid intel that probably saved this man's life. Can we use her information to trace back to whoever hired the contract? Gordon nodded. Agent Wyatt has been trying to locate Rosa since last night, but she's disappeared. We have officers watching her apartment, her workplace, the places she frequents. No sign of her. It's possible she's gone into deeper hiding. It's also possible the people who were supposed to kill you decided to prioritize killing her instead, since she's the one who warned you. That thought made my stomach turn. Rosa had saved my life and might have died for it. I asked if there was anything I could do to help find her, but Gordon shut that down immediately. You're staying here under protection until we resolve this. The moment you leave this cabin, you become a target again. I spent 3 days in that cabin with Derek rotating shifts with another agent named Lucia Park. Agent Wyatt visited daily with updates that mostly consisted of, "We're still investigating." On the 4th day, she arrived with news that shifted everything. "We found Rosa Delgado. She's alive, but she's in bad shape. Someone ambushed her at a gas station 2 days ago. She managed to fight them off and escape, but she sustained injuries. She's currently at a secure medical facility receiving treatment and has agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation in exchange for witness protection." I felt overwhelming relief. Rosa had survived, but Agent Wyatt's expression suggested there was more. Rosa provided us with extensive information about Sentinel Group, including the identity of the person who's been coordinating the contracts. His name is Vincent Lazaro, a former CIA operative who started the organization 15 years ago. Rosa gave us access to encrypted files she'd kept as insurance, including communications between Lazaro and his clients. Agent Wyatt pulled out a tablet and showed me screenshots of email exchanges. The emails were between Vincent Lazaro and someone using the alias Architect. The Architect had hired Sentinel Group to eliminate several people connected to the Synthcore investigation: me, Rosa, and 2 other whistleblowers I'd never heard of. The contract was worth $500,000 per target, with bonus payments for making the deaths look like accidents. The emails discussed logistics, timelines, and methods with chilling clinical detachment. But the most damning part was the final email in the chain, sent just 3 days ago. It included my name, address, daily routine, and workplace schedule, and at the bottom, there was a digital signature that made my blood run cold. The email had been sent from Special Agent Veronica Huang's official FBI account. "We arrested Special Agent Huang this morning," Agent Wyatt said quietly. "She's being charged with conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and violating the witness security program. She claims her email account was hacked, but our forensic analysis shows the emails were sent from her personal laptop, using her credentials with no signs of unauthorized access. She sent your information to Vincent Lazaro, and she's been doing it for years with other witnesses in cases she's handled." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The FBI agent I'd trusted to protect me had been the one trying to kill me. Why? Why would she do this? Gordon Phillips, who'd been listening silently, answered. "Money, most likely. We're still tracing her financial records, but preliminary analysis shows she received wire transfers totaling over $2 million in the past 5 years from offshore accounts. She was being paid to compromise investigations from the inside." The betrayal was staggering. I'd risked everything to report Synthcore's crimes, and the person responsible for protecting me had sold me out for profit. Agent Wyatt continued. "With Huang in custody, we've been able to trace her communications and identify her handler. Vincent Lazaro is currently in Morocco, beyond our immediate reach, but we've issued an international warrant for his arrest. We're also working with Interpol to locate and arrest other members of Sentinel Group. Rosa's cooperation has been invaluable." I asked about the 2 men who'd broken into my apartment, and Lieutenant Crane pulled out his phone to show me booking photos. "We identified them through Rosa's intel and arrested them yesterday. Both are career criminals with records for assault and weapons charges. They're cooperating now that they realize they were part of a conspiracy that involves a federal agent. They've confirmed Huang was the one who provided your location and schedule." Over the next 2 weeks, the case expanded as more evidence emerged. Special Agent Huang's laptop contained years of communications with Vincent Lazaro, showing she'd compromised at least 12 different investigations and leaked information that led to the deaths of 4 witnesses. The FBI launched an internal review to determine how she'd operated undetected for so long. News outlets picked up the story, running headlines about corruption in the FBI and failures in the witness protection system. I watched the coverage from the cabin, feeling strange seeing my situation discussed on national news. The journalists didn't use my name, referring to me only as an unnamed witness whose life was saved by a warning from a reformed contract killer. But anyone who knew me could probably piece together that I was involved. After 3 weeks in the safe house, Gordon Phillips returned with a formal offer. We're prepared to place you in the witness security program with a new identity, relocation to a different state, and financial assistance to rebuild your life. Given the severity of the threat against you and the public nature of this case, we believe that's the safest option. I thought about it carefully. WITSEC meant giving up my name, my history, my connections to everyone I'd known before. It meant becoming someone else entirely. But the alternative was living in constant fear that someone connected to Vincent Lazaro might finish what Veronica Huang had started. What about Rosa? I asked. Is she getting the same offer? Gordon nodded. Rosa Delgado is already enrolled in the program under a new identity. She's relocating to an undisclosed location where she'll have no connection to her previous life. If you accept our offer, you'll never see her again. That's part of how the program works. Complete separation from anyone connected to your old identity. I accepted the offer. I didn't see another choice. They gave me 3 days to prepare, during which I was allowed to make a handful of supervised phone calls to close out my old life. I called my parents and told them a sanitized version, that I'd been placed in witness protection for my safety and wouldn't be able to contact them again. My mother cried. My father asked questions I wasn't allowed to answer. I called David and thanked him for being a friend, told him I was going somewhere safe but couldn't say where. I called my former boss at NextGen Solutions and resigned effective immediately, citing personal emergencies I couldn't discuss. Each call felt like closing a door I'd never be able to reopen. On the final day at the cabin, Agent Wyatt arrived with a manila envelope containing my new identity. Inside was a driver's license, a social security card, and a passport, all bearing a name I'd never heard before, Nathan Cross. I stared at the documents, at the stranger's name that was supposedly mine now, and felt the weight of everything I was leaving behind. Agent Wyatt sat across from me and spoke gently. I know this is difficult, but you're alive because Rosa Delgado risked everything to warn you, and because you took that warning seriously. A lot of people in witness protection end up here because they ignored red flags or trusted the wrong people. You did everything right. I asked if there was any way to contact Rosa, to thank her for saving my life. Agent Wyatt shook her head. She specifically requested that you not try to find her. She said saving you was payment for the people she didn't save when she worked for Sentinel Group. She doesn't want your gratitude. She just wants you to live. They relocated me to a mid-sized city in the Pacific Northwest, set me up with a modest apartment and a job working IT support for a nonprofit organization. My new name was Nathan Cross, 34 years old, originally from Minnesota. No criminal record, no interesting history. I was aggressively ordinary, which was exactly the point. I started my new life with a strange mixture of relief and grief. Relief that I was safe, grief for everything I'd lost. For the first few months, I jumped at every unexpected sound, convinced that someone from Sentinel Group had found me despite the precautions. But gradually, the paranoia faded into a low-level awareness that I'd never be completely safe. But I could be safe enough. I followed the news about the Synthcore case and Veronica Huang's prosecution. She was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. Vincent Lazaro was eventually arrested in Greece and extradited to the United States, where he faced charges related to multiple contract killings. His trial was ongoing when I stopped following it, tired of reliving the trauma every time I read an update. I wanted to move forward, not stay trapped in what had happened. I made new friends in my new city, people who knew me only as Nathan Cross and had no idea about grocery store cashiers or safe houses or federal conspiracies. I dated occasionally, though I never told anyone the truth about my past. How could I explain that my entire identity was a government-constructed fiction designed to keep me alive? 5 years after that night at Save Mart, I was shopping at a different grocery store in a different city, under a different name, when I saw an older woman at the checkout lane who reminded me of Rosa. Same age, same tired eyes, same way of holding herself like she was carrying invisible weight. It wasn't her. I knew it couldn't be her, knew she was somewhere else living under her own false identity. But for a moment, I wanted to walk up to that cashier and thank her for everything, wanted to tell her that I'd built a good life because she'd been brave enough to warn a stranger. Instead, I finished my shopping and drove home to the apartment where I lived as Nathan Cross, and I thought about how many people were probably walking around with secret identities and hidden pasts, how many lives had been saved by warnings that came at exactly the right moment, how many debts of gratitude existed that could never be repaid. The groceries I bought that week included pasta and marinara sauce, the same items I'd been buying 5 years ago when Rosa told me it was my last meal. But this time, I made the pasta and ate it while watching a movie in my living room, and nobody tried to kill me. The meal wasn't my last, it was just dinner. And every time I cooked after that, every mundane trip to the grocery store, every ordinary evening in my government-assigned life, I thought about the fact that I was alive because a former contract killer had decided to save someone instead of staying silent. I'd never see Rosa Delgado again. I'd never get to thank her properly. but I lived the life she'd given me as well as I could, and tried to believe that was thanks enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.